well briefed, for your questions. So we're going to have someone pass the mic to you so that we can pick up on your audio. Just raise your hand. There's one in the middle, right?
Hi, my name is Ian Magnuson, and I'm just completed my first year Master in Public Policy at MSU. I know thematically we're talking more on the national state level, but considering we have an expert in the Detroit and Grand Rapids area, I'm curious what local governments can do to support the mission of MONA and just immigrant inclusion in general.
I will take Southeast Michigan, let Bing take Grand Rapids. So we partner with a number of entities all over the state, but looking at Southeast Michigan specifically, I'll name a couple of organizations that we partner with that are doing work on community and immigrant integration. One is Global Detroit, which is a nonprofit. It was born out of the premise that immigrants have a positive impact on economic development. Two of the programs that they have, I'll highlight just two of them. One is called Welcome at Detroit, which is an online immigrant integration network. Basically, for individuals who are new to Southeast Michigan, they can go online to welcomeatdetroit.org and look up, where can I take ESL classes? Where can I find a physician that speaks my language? Where can I worship? It's an online interactive database for immigrant integration. They also run a program that partners very closely with as Michigan State, among others, called the Global Talent Retention Initiative, that looks at retaining this great, wonderful international talent coming out of our universities. In addition, we also partner very closely with Macomb County. Macomb County has an effort called One Macomb, which is their diversity and inclusion effort for the county. Really amazing, wonderful stuff going on in Macomb County when it comes to immigrant integration. One highlight from One Macomb, and then I'll let Bing talk about Grand Rapids. One highlight out of One Macomb is that Macomb County realized that they really needed to start from within, and so they worked with their employee service provider that allows for one educational class for all employees each year. A lot of times they're about aging seniors or long-term planning, that kind of thing. But they worked with their provider to actually develop a diversity and inclusion training. And so all of Macomb County employees have to go through that training, which I think is really awesome. And they did both their existing employees, and now anyone that starts with the county has to go through that training as well.
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for that. The local government certainly can play a significant role in ensuring that their city is a welcoming city for new Americans. The thing that I'm learning from in Grand Rapids and the West Michigan side, and I must ask for apologies here because I'm from the business world, so I'm looking for results. I don't always look for programs. I want to figure out how you're going to get there. So I've been working and speaking with the mayor of Grand Rapids, and we're working together and trying to figure out a way how to ensure that we are the recipients of great talents that come from these new Americans. And we do that working with police departments. We're looking to do that with social service agencies. We're looking to do that with resettlement agencies. And Kalamazoo has become really a leader in this in West Michigan. They are really aggressively pursuing and taking steps to make sure they are a welcoming city for new Americans to choose Kalamazoo as their live, work, and play destination. It's all about intentionality. We can talk about immigration, but if there are no immigrants around the table, it's not very helpful. So one of the things that Mayor Bliss and I are talking about is how do we make sure that those voices are at the table when we're talking about these types of necessary policies and programs to ensure to be a welcoming city. So, I think every local government has an opportunity. I think it has to be intentional and has to be inclusive, and it has to be led with the understanding that every voice is a valuable voice and every voice should be taken seriously. Thank you.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick to point out, we actually don't have a national immigrant integration policy. We have a national enforcement policy, but we don't have, and some countries do, right? So if you look at comparisons of the same immigrant population in US and Canada, just across the border, you will see higher rates of naturalization for those populations in Canada than you do in the US, even though there's more value in naturalizing in the US. It's because Canada has a national integration policy. So in the US, enforcement happens at the national level, but integration happens almost entirely at the local and to a certain extent state level. So if you are interested in doing something at the state level, or at the local level, that's pretty much the only place it ever happens, and you have, a fair amount of freedom to design whatever it is you want to do. And these are largely private-public partnerships, right? So private entities, individuals, organizations working with local, state, county government offices. The downside is there's very few resources available for it. You have to generate those, but the upside is you have the freedom to implement it. So if you want to be a community that welcomes immigrants, it's up to you to do that. There's just, strangely enough, no policy at the national level that support it.
Thank you so much for that. This is another thing that we need to start asking our elected officials. Talk about resources. We're willing to invest billions of dollars to deport people, but we have, like what's been said, we have minimal investments in helping people to become integrated into our society. So investment is a major part of being successful, so that we don't always keep talking.
I've been traveling quite a bit, and I've noticed in different states down through Kentucky, local communities have signs saying this is a friendly community. So this is evidently a national effort.
You'll see them in Ann Arbor.
In Ann Arbor.
In Lansing too.
In Louisville, and
Yeah,
Fort
Lansing.
Wayne, Ypsilanti. So do you know about that as a national effort?
So there is, there's a national organization called Welcoming America, which is a nonprofit, and they've got chapters across the country, including one here in Michigan. It's called Welcoming Michigan. It's an affiliate to the National Welcoming America Plan, and what that is looking at immigrant integration very much at a grassroots community level. Michigan is proud to have the most welcoming cities and counties campaign, and One Macomb is actually part of that. East Lansing is a welcoming city. City of Detroit's a welcoming city. There's a number, Grand Rapids just joined. Michigan's proud to have the largest number of welcoming cities and counties of any state across the country, which is fabulous. We kind of go neck and neck with Ohio and Pennsylvania starting to grow on us too, but we're still in the lead, which is something we're very proud of. It's separate from our office, but it's a program that we work. It's one of our partners, Welcoming Michigan is. So there's definitely efforts going on across the country.
I work for a central personnel agency in state government here, and I remember very well the 1986 Immigration Reform Act, it was called. And pretty much it required employers to fill out papers and hand them in, and so now here we are 31 years later, and we have 11 million unauthorized, undocumented, whatever. And so what is the problem? Maybe some benefits, because we legalized a lot of people in the 86 Reform Act. What are some of the problems with that? What are lessons to be learned from the failure of that act? Could that inform what we need to do at a national level?
I could talk about this one for a long time. So we did two things with IRCA, the law that was passed in 1986. We created a legalization process for regularizing people who were without proper documentation, right? We call that amnesty. It's sort of the pejorative term. The other thing we did was we significantly increased border enforcement. So what you had prior to IRCA was a circular migration, where people largely, this is largely driven by migration from Mexico, although there's lots of other, Mexicans are like about half of the unauthorized population. They would come into the US and work for a while and then return home, knowing that they could probably get back into the country pretty easily, because we didn't have the kind of militarized border enforcement that we have now. So what people did was they continued to come into the U.S. Anytime you have an increase in border enforcement, it's without fail. The entries dip temporarily and then pop right back up to where they were before. Because people don't come into the U.S. because nobody's standing on the border telling them not to. They come into the U.S. because they don't have the ability to support themselves or realize the economic potential that their own abilities could realize. And wages in the U.S. are 60 times what they are in Mexico. That's why people come, right? So people would continue to come to the U.S., they would find a way, but then they would never go back. Because if they go back, they could be apprehended trying to return. This is their one shot. So they just stayed. And so what you saw was a population that went from 1 million unauthorized migrants pre-IRCA to 10, 11 million that we have now, because that circulation was halted. Now what you see, so we have very different circumstances in Mexico now. Right now, we have net zero unauthorized migration to the US from Mexico. That means more people are returning to Mexico than are coming. And it's not because we're talking about building a wall. It's not because of the $4.2 billion we continue to spend on the existing border enforcement we have now. It's because of two things. Our economy slowed down and Mexico's population is older. They have far fewer working age people in Mexico that would want to come here. So as their population ages, fewer people are going to come. As our economy slows down, post 2008, we're less of a draw. So I think the lesson from IRCA isn't that we can create a policy that somehow will erase economic and demographic forces. You have to look at the economic and demographic forces and then create a policy that works with that, right? Policy shouldn't be created because if I do this, I'll look tough on fill in the blank and I'll get lots of votes. Policy should be created based on looking at what the reality is on the ground and then designing something that's going to work with that. You cannot change demographics, and you can't easily change massive global economic dynamics. So you have to look at it and see what can we change and then what we're going to have to work with. So I mean, IRCA in some ways was a huge success because lots of people were regularized. Lots of people were brought, what they say, out of the shadows. The problem is that we screwed up on the border enforcement.
Just to add one piece to that, kind of looking at the economic impact when we're talking about that unauthorized population, I'm just going to talk about one piece, and this is nationally. In 2014, and this continues on almost an annual basis, quote-unquote undocumented immigrants contributed almost $160 million to Social Security. They won't ever see that money, but anyone of the rest of us who might collect Social Security may.
Hi, my name is Amy Maldonado, and I am a local immigration attorney, and I have a comment about that and a question. So my comment is, the one thing we did not do after IRCA was we didn't fix our system of non-immigrant and immigrant visas. It has basically been the same since 1952. It does not fit at all with the economic reality of the country we live in. It's very, very difficult to obtain a legal visa to come and be a migrant worker, or a legal visa. I mean, it is just really, really tough. We also have some caps on migration from specific countries. So for immigrant visas, which are people getting green cards, there's a 7% cap on nationals from any one country per year of the total numbers available. So we have backlogs for quote-unquote high-skilled workers from China and India that keep people not in a basically limbo for 12, 15 years where they're waiting to get a green card. So my question is for the Mona people, I'm really interested in taking away the barriers to professionals. That's interesting. So I know for medical professionals, those paths are really clear. You have the Commission for Graduates of Foreign Nursing Schools and the physician dsetvmuskegon counterpart to that. What other occupations are there that you're working on regulations for?
So as Bing mentioned, we've got 44 different occupational licensing guides for skilled immigrants online. I'm not going to go through all of them. There are a number of healthcare there. Physical therapist, nurse, dentist, occupational therapist, I think is there. I believe social worker is there. So what those guides do is it takes our state licensing process for those occupations and it breaks it down into a step-by-step. If I'm foreign educated and foreign trained, how do I get a license in Michigan to be an architect, an accountant, a nurse, etc. So because with those who are foreign educated and foreign trained, they might have to get their credentials evaluated, or they might have to take the test for English as a foreign language, the TOEFL. And this kind of talks about what they need to do to go through that licensing process, but in a much simpler manner than what our normal licensing process might state. And those are on Laura's website, and ours too, actually.
So I have a follow-up question. So California and New York are the two only states in the country where if you have a Master of Laws degrees, you can become an attorney in those two states. Is that something you're looking at for Michigan?
So from what I understand, Michigan used to have that, and it was I think it was the state bar that took that away. I think some people shaking their heads. So although I worked in immigration law for 25 years, I'm not an attorney, but I worked in immigration law for a long time. So I do remember the time when there used to be able to do the Masters of Laws, because we have people that came in foreign education, but got a U.S. LLM and were able to sit for the bar. It is, at this point, it is something we have taken a look at. Are we going to do anything about it? That's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of things on our plate. We're looking at physician licensing, which is completely difficult. And especially given what we were talking about with our healthcare shortage, licensing of foreign physicians is really challenging. But we're looking at skilled trades. I mean, there's a lot of different areas within the state of Michigan where there's some shortages that we're trying to look at the licensing piece.
Hello, my name is Jane Bayou. I'm from Michigan State University. My question relates to higher education. Beyond the contribution of foreign-born or immigrants to Michigan and their contribution to economic development benefits in terms of dollar values and their contribution to diversity, how are we really tracking or monitoring or even evaluating this intellectual energy contribution that our foreign-born workers or immigrants are contributing to our higher education institutions, to Michigan economy, or to the U.S. in general?
That would be a good question about assessment and how are we assessing those and some of those skills. I think I don't have a good answer for that. I think we are doing some cultural sensitivity. I think there are some things going on at the university level. There are some surveys, and we're progressing along with the population, with the student population. And they have some things going on where they're testing or they're assessing other things besides the economic impacts, besides those. They start with the freshmen and then move through the senior year. They're doing surveys, they're doing some assessment in that area. That's not my area of expertise. Everyone I see is an international. But I think there are things going on. How do you market that? How do you bring that out? And how do you supplement that so that can be stressed?
I think you've really identified a need.
Yeah, sometimes there is some data collection. So for example, in one of the reports I listed as a suggested resource, they talk about the fact that 74% of the patents coming out of the University of Michigan have foreign-born listed as one of the inventors. So there are some of those type of statistics out. However, it also can get tricky once the international students do graduate, and if they go from their OPT to their H-1B, it's not necessarily easy to just track them without doing some kind of survey data specifically and trying to target and then hope that people actually respond to the survey or you can interview those people. I mean, it's the usual issues that they have, but it can be difficult to track folks once they actually leave the institutions.
We're colleagues, actually, so we probably should have coordinated our questions before we asked them. Jane and I are doing a study on the social, economic, and academic impact of scholars at the universities, foreign scholars at the universities in Michigan. And I was wondering how you measured economic impact in your study for the contributions of immigrants, and then also whether those data sets are available.
So for me specifically, in terms of we actually, because it's pretty much the two of us sitting at the table and Annie, who makes up the Michigan Office for New Americans, we don't do any specific research out of our office. We do partner very closely with national organizations, the Migration Policy Institute, we're separate sides. The New American Economy has been a big one that we've partnered with, and that, for the contributions of New Americans in Michigan, the data sets, both some of the general Michigan top information I provided, as well as the breakdown by U.S. congressional district, was done by the New American Economy. Their methodology is included at the end of their reports, so you could take a look at the suggested resources I had. Give me your card, I can send them to you as well.
So I'd like some advice from each of you. We talked a little bit, or you've talked a little bit about what the state, what local government, what the federal government can do to make the country, the state, our local community a more welcoming place. Let's shift to us, most of whom, at least looking around, are probably born in the United States, but not all, may have first-generation spouses or other relatives, as I do in my case. And let me ask you this question: in what's one thing, if you had to pick one thing each, one sentence, hopefully one non-political sentence of advice to give each of us to make, that we could do, that we could accomplish to be a more welcoming American, a more welcoming, perhaps, Michiganian, a more welcoming, in my case, a Williamston Michiganian.
We're still in our closing.
Other than shutting off the mic on me, what would that be?
Well, let me tell you what was real beneficial to us as a family when we arrived in the United States. People came to us and became our friend.
I will say, to build on what Bing just said, educate yourselves. Don't necessarily believe everything you hear and read. Look at multiple sources. The louder voices aren't, or just because someone says something doesn't necessarily make it true. So make sure you're really educating yourself on what the topic might be.
I have a poster in my office that says, "We all smile in the same language," so I would say smile.
Whoa.
Despite it all, I still believe in facts. So what I like to do actually in these situations is have like 5 or 6 good ones in my back pocket. And throughout your day, when somebody says something that you know is just not true and is problematic in terms of welcoming immigrants, I pull those things out of my back pocket. Well, so this is the sort of two dynamics we're talking about. One is being welcoming to immigrants, and the other is addressing the people who are not. You can't change everybody's mind, but sometimes, certainly if you know this person and you have a relationship with them, you busting those myths is way more effective than me doing it, on an Ipser stream. So I say keep those things in your back pocket. Have them at the ready, and when the situation comes up, whip them out like a red card at a soccer game.
I promised one more question to this gentleman over here. And so, thank you for your closing comments. Are you good with that? Thank you.
What is the effect of new Americans in the country that they left. It's good for us, but how good is it for the countries that they left?
That may be our next form.
Well, depends on the country, but most of them are benefiting extremely from remittances. El Salvador, more than half of their economy, about half is remittances from the U.S. Salvadorans who live in the U.S. and send money back. Half of their economy. Immigration is, in many ways, a form of foreign aid. We bring the most productive people from a particular country, and they send resources back. So it can actually, and there's lots of people doing work in countries of origin to use those funds for development. So they will form associations, and governments will have programs to provide economic and educational opportunities and whatnot to people who have stayed or have returned, funded entirely by the remittances of immigrants.
Just echo, I really do think it depends on the country. I mean, if you look at our Syrian refugees or our Chaldean Iraqi refugees, what does it take from their country? If they go home, they might not be alive, right? If you look at, right, I know there are a number of people here too from Mexico that do the same thing. They send some of their earnings back home. We also have certain visa categories that when individuals come here to the U.S. to study, it requires them to go home for a certain period of time to apply what they've learned before they could come back. So I think there's this whole, I'm going to use the broader term, right, global migration, where you've got folks kind of swirling all around the world, per se. And I think it just benefits all the different countries that are touched by these individuals.
Well, I think, again, we've had an excellent briefing on the topic of immigration today. You know, throughout this season of public policy forums, we've had so many emotional kinds of topics. And actually, we started in September. Today wraps up our 2016-2017. So these forums have really brought attention to some of the issues that not only Michigan is most concerned with, but our nation, right? And their emotions are pretty high. What we hope to do is to bring you the research, bring you some facts to use, like Stephanie said, and enlighten the conversation with some real information that's believable, that you know you can bank on. So I hope we've been successful in doing that. There hasn't been a time since we had 2 forums in September, and we've had 5. This is our 5th in the spring. And it seems as if every single forum this year, when I've come up after the panelists have presented, I thought, wow, you know, we have so much talent in our state and so much to contribute to our policy community. So I hope that you'll talk with your policymakers even about how you feel about these issues, but pull out those facts, maybe something that you've learned here today or throughout the year from these forums, and use that to help our community, our policy community, make good decisions, make sound, fact-oriented, research-based decisions about how we move forward. I mentioned this is our last forum of the season, so I want to just give a shout out to our director, Professor Grossman, Matt Grossman, who's been so supportive of continuing these forums through the year and doing more of them. So thank you for that, Matt. We're planning quite a schedule for 2017, 2018, and we'll begin those in September. We already have those dates, and we'll put those on our website, as we will all of the presentations that you saw here today. I think there are a few folks who wanted to check a few resources, make sure that you could go to those presentations and then go to their resources and use the information that you found there. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for the support of the forums. Really appreciate it. You guys have a good summer.